This episode is sponsored by Jacobson Real Estate Company. Are you ready to find your dream home? Or maybe you're thinking about selling and want the best deal possible? Well, look no further. At Jacobson Real Estate Company, we make buying or selling your home smooth, stress-free, and exciting. With 50 plus years of experience and a deep knowledge of the Winona, Minnesota area market, we specialize in turning your real estate goals into reality. Whether it's finding that perfect neighborhood, negotiating top dollar for your property, or answering all of your questions along the way, we're here for you. Plus, with our personalized approach, you're not just a client, you're family. So why wait? Let Jacobson Real Estate Company open the door to your future. Call us today at 507-313-2716 or visit our website at jacobsonrealestatecompany.com. Because your next chapter starts here. Buy, sell, invest. Jacobson Real Estate Company. Welcome to this week's edition of Brews and Crews. I am your host, Chris Jacobson, and today I'm going to be doing a podcast that I did not think I would be doing for probably at least another 3 years, and that is one in memory of our family dog, Stephanie and I, and his name was Jake. You probably heard about him on many podcasts or even just the one I did last year in remembrance of Cooper. But before we do that, I'm going to crack open the Roknar, Minnesota rye whiskey from Far North Spirits. And we'll be pouring this one out in honor of Jake. And for those who are watching, you'll notice that in the background, the TV does not actually have the like, share, subscribe on it. It has a photo of Jake on one of his final days. Also, in the background over my head, there's normally a Brews and Crews logo, and that is a flower for Jake because of the fact that he loved smelling flowers with his mama. So, as far as this podcast, not really sure where to start because it's the most premature death of an animal I've ever had, and I've only had 3 so far in my life. I had Jordan, who lived to about a week before he was 16. Stephanie and I had Cooper, and he lived to 15 and a half. He was about 3 months away from his 16th birthday, so he was 15 and a half. And then Jake suddenly passed away at just over 6 years old back in April. It's taken me a little while to do this podcast, probably because it's a very unexpected one. Take me a little time because it's still been rough over the last few months since we've had to put him down because he had aggressive liver cancer. And it came, well, for us, it came out of nowhere. What had happened is back in April, as we were pregnant with our baby Lainey, we found out that he had a liver cancer, but it came because the reason we found out is because he loved to jump up on the bed with us. We have a taller bed, and he would always love to cuddle with us because that's just his breed. That's who he is. And what he would do is jump up, and I noticed after a week or about 2 weeks maybe before he passed away that he would yelp every so often when he'd jump up on the bed, and that was not like him. He's pretty agile for a big dog. If you know anything about English Mastiffs, and I'm going to go over that in just a little bit, you know they're not exactly a small breed dog. But he was starting to jump up on our bed, and I noticed he yelped a little bit. And I thought, he maybe have tweaked something because the week before we had my mother-in-law's dog down to do doggy daycare, and they would run around the yard and all that. So I just thought, maybe he tweaked something because a big guy running around with a little dog and going back and forth. He was pretty agile. And I just thought maybe something happened to his leg. But turns out it happened to be what was pain in his liver from what the doctors kind of figured was probably the reason. We went in thinking that we were going to get some relief from a pill that they gave him, but I think it may have sped up the process of what was going on. The next week after, it was the Friday, I know before he passed away, my wife called me. I was teaching at school, and she said something's definitely wrong with him. He's not acting like himself, this, that, and the other thing. Doesn't want to eat. And we just thought maybe he was, not feeling great. I mean, dogs can not feel great. That's fine. But it was kind of odd. So we took him in, and they said that I think it was his enzyme count was 14 times-ish higher than the normal count. And so what we had to do is that day, we rushed him up to Eau Claire to an emergency vet. That's the closest one we really kind of have that was able to help in this situation. There's another one in Stewartville, but they recommended go to Eau Claire because they can do certain monitoring. So we went up there, and mind you, I am teaching, but also we were supposed to go on a class trip that day, which we did, which just happened to be in Eau Claire as well. So I was in the right spot at the right time to be there. And so my wife and my dad rushed Jake to Eau Claire. Luckily, there was another parent along for the class trip, so she could monitor the kids that we had. I think there's 8 of them, if I remember right. So she watched them while I went over to the emergency vet, and they started taking a look at him, and, he looked pretty fine. Looked, just a little bit like he was panting a lot. And that's what happens when you get liver cancer, it sounds like, is that you start panting and all that. So what happened was they took him back. They evaluated him. They said, we got to keep him overnight. We want to, get him obviously hydrated because his pee was very, very yellow. And it actually got worse than that as the week progressed from there. But anyways, they took him back. They kept him overnight, and we stayed overnight in Eau Claire. My dad took my truck and drove the kids back home after they were done with their class trip with the other parent that was there. So thankfully that was all able to happen because I stayed up with my wife in Eau Claire, and then we waited overnight. They said he was doing good. He was running, he was going to the bathroom, doing fine, not a problem. And then he said, we'll call you back later when we possibly get some results because we're going to have to take some samples and all that kind of stuff. So that's what we waited for. And gosh, it was like 9:00 that night waiting. And I just like, well, maybe I should call because the next shift of doctors should be in by now, the next vets. And so I called and they said, well, let me call you back here in a little bit. We're just switching shifts. I said, okay, that's no problem. They called me back, and that's when they told me we think that there might be a tumor on his liver, but we're not 100% sure. So in order to find out if that is actually the case, we need you to go up to St. Paul, Minneapolis area to our other affiliate emergency vet who can get more details in on the samples. And so then the next morning we got up 6 a.m., went and got him, took him over to the Minneapolis, St. Paul emergency vet. And that's when they took him in. They said, okay, we're going to do some samples on him. It might be, 24 to 48 hours. Well, if you don't know anything about emergency vets, they're very expensive. You're talking thousands of dollars per day. So we take him there. He goes back. We just go and run some errands. It's not exactly having the finest day of our life because we just know something's up. However, we thought everything's going to be okay because he's had other issues, and I'll come up with that as I go through his life here. So we're like, oh, he's going to bounce out of this. He's going to be just fine. So day goes by. We go and we went to Target, did some errands, had some lunch, went to a brewery, and they called us at 5 o'clock. And I was like, wow, that was quick because they said it might not be until tomorrow. So I answered the phone, and gosh, I remember this distinctly. The doctor said we found a mass on his liver, and it is cancerous, and it is continuing to spread rapidly. As you can imagine, going through my head, I'm like, okay, what does that mean? So I asked the doctor, what does that mean? He goes, well, there's 3 options for you at the moment. Number 1, you can do surgery. There's about a 5% chance that it'll work. And there's also a possibility he dies on the operating table, and that could cost about $20,000. Okay, that's very shocking enough. Number 2 is to give him pills and let him live out his last days as best as possible. And 3 was just to put him down on the spot. Well, 3 was out of the question. Number 1 went through my mind briefly, but $20,000, 5% chance. I mean, you kind of do the math. And then if he dies on the operating table, he's not by anybody that he knows. So that one didn't sound like it was the best option either. So we went with option 2. And that was to get him the pills that he needed to live comfortably, try to prolong his life as best as possible. I asked the doctor how long he thought. He said a week, a few weeks at best. And he lasted from that Saturday we found out to the final to the next Thursday, 5 days basically, to the point where we could tell this wasn't going well. Yeah, I remember that phone call very, very distinctly. That was crazy. It was. I went to the bathroom and at the place we were at because we were going to go home and get him. Take him home to be where he's comfortable with family that loves him. And I remember just walking to the bathroom, dead stare. I don't even remember if people were walking by me or not. I just couldn't believe what I had heard. It was like the worst thing you could imagine to hear is put your dog down on the spot possibly. So obviously Stephanie and I, we went to the car, bawled our eyes out as one can imagine, picked up Jake, and we went home from the cities to let him live out his last days. The photo that you're looking at right behind me here, that was just the Monday, I believe, or Sunday. I think it was Monday, though. The Monday before he passed, and we just thought it was a very peaceful photo. And he had never really ever just sat out in the yard and just sat and took in the breeze, took in everything. He was like, go out, do your business, sniff around a little bit, come back to the door, get back in, possibly get a treat or whatever it might be. So he never did that until like his last 5 days of his life where he would just go outside, he would sit and just take it all in. It's almost like he knew something was up. And that was just from that Friday. Because Friday was, his Thursday, the week before, he was pretty normal, just wouldn't eat. But he'd go outside, come back in, do his thing. And then you could just tell it's almost like he knew something was wrong. And maybe he could tell because of us, because dogs are obviously pretty perceptive. Maybe he knew by our emotions that something was wrong with him. And he could probably feel it too, because you can't see it in that photo. But as the week progressed, that's when things kept getting worse. One was with his urinary. He wouldn't pee as much. And then progressively throughout the week, it went from almost a neon yellow to eventually almost like a dark gold. And that's when we knew things were not good on that Thursday, or actually it's really more on that Tuesday, Wednesday we knew. But that week we basically just gave him everything he wanted food-wise, which is not like that because he had a condition, motility issue in his throat, and also it's kind of like megaesophagus, and I'll get more into that. So when it came to that kind of stuff, we said, you know what, just give him everything he wants because, if he's going to die here probably in the next few days, and if he were to pass away, at least he had some food and he wasn't restricted, basically giving him everything he wanted. But that was very short-lived as well. Sunday and Monday, gave him some McDonald's hamburgers, loved them. By about Monday evening, Tuesday evening, he would just have the burger, and then eventually he didn't want any of it. We were giving him pills to help with the pain, which they did help. The pain did help because he wasn't in any pain from what we can tell. He never whimpered, never whined, nothing like that. But he did progressively in his stomach area bloat. He started bloating pretty significant. By Wednesday, I had to call up the doctor and say, we can't do this to him anymore. And then on Thursday, that morning, I took off the next 2 days of work and just wanted to be with my wife while we had to grieve this process, while also having to remind ourselves that this should also be the happiest part of our life too, because in less than a month, our daughter is going to be born. So it was a really tricky, crappy way to start off kind of what should be the happiest part of your life with dealing with the sadness of losing a pet, and especially a pet when they're only 6 years old. Now, granted, Mastiffs, most people know, giant breed dogs don't live as long. We were under the impression, obviously, 8 to 12 years. We saw the average, it looked like 9 to 10, maybe 11 if you got lucky from all the Mastiff pages we were on. So we already knew that was that was what we were to expect. And we were fully expected that. But when he dies 2 to 6 years early, that's where it became pretty devastating for both of us, because that was like my real dog, like the one that I actually had that was kind of, I got him. So Jordan was, we got him when I was 15, but he eventually became my mom's dog, and there's reasons why. She spoiled him like none other. So it almost kind of became her dog, but then I left and went to college, and then I also left to go to Atlanta. So a big portion of Jordan's life I wasn't even really there for, even though he was our family dog. And then Cooper was obviously, I was in his life longer than, more than half his life, well more than half of his life, because Stephanie and I started dating when he was, I believe, 6, and he passed away last summer. We had to put him down in June. So I was in his life for like 10 years. So he was kind of my dog as well. But this is the one where we got him from a breeder in town here. Not AKC registered or anything like that, AKC. It was just a breeder in Lewiston. And somehow Stephanie convinced me to say, yeah, let's get a second dog. That's a great idea. And at first I was a little hesitant. We went and visited him, and he was with his mom and dad. And they were well maintained. They were well behaved. Just a little dirty because they lived on a farm, but that's expected of a farm dog. They're not indoor dogs and stuff like that. And he was the last one of his litter because he was actually the runt of the litter. Believe it or not, a 155-pound dog is the runt of a litter eventually. But when his dad was 225 pounds and mom was 185 pounds, yes, he was the runt. But most people, when they saw him, they go, holy smokes, he's a big dog. I go, yeah, well, his parents were even bigger than that, 225 for dad and 185 for mom. So he was the runt of the litter, but he was 155 pounds is eventually what we got him up to. So I remember we went up and visited him, and the two dogs, mom and dad, were really, really well behaved, maintained, all that kind of stuff. But they slobbered a lot, and they were hairy. So I remember we got back in the car after, and she's like, so what do you think? I'm like, are you sure that's the dog we should get? I mean, look at us. I am slobbery and hairy, and we were only with him for 5 minutes. I don't want the house to look like that. So we thought about it a little bit longer, and I said, all right. They wanted this. I said, offer this price. If they take it, it's meant to be. Gave them the money. Sure enough, they said, yep, that's fine, absolutely. And he comes home with us. I want to say that was May 19th, I think. May 19th of 2019. So we got him in 2019 just before COVID. And I remember exactly where I was at. I was at a car auction with my buddy Justin on the motorcycles. She said, I got him. And I'm like, oh boy, awesome. So I get home and I didn't know what to expect. And there he is, this little, he fit on one couch cushion at the time. So he was at one point very small. So he could have been on my lap. And in fact, he did sit on my lap for, not very long, but for a little bit of time, he did sit on laps. Anyway, so we get him home, and I'm just like, oh, wow, 2 dogs. Never had that before. I only had 1 dog growing up. Some people have multiple, so it's not really unusual. But for me, I was like, okay, well, we're going to get slobbery and hairy. Turns out, when they don't live on a farm, they live inside, they're not as hairy as they might be anywhere else, just because we would give him baths regularly. We would brush him and stuff like that. So he wasn't living outside most of the day. He was inside. He was a couch potato. And so we got him, and the only time he ever drooled was 1, if he was excited for his treats or food, and 2, if he was sick. So those were easy ways to distinguish if he was kind of sick, if he would drool a lot. Didn't happen really in that last week that I recall, but my wife may recall something differently that Friday morning. So anyways, we bring him home. Great dog. I'm like, wow, it's pretty cool. As he grows up, he's really well maintained. He's big, gentle giant, as they're called. So that was really fun to see. And then we'd have photos as he would grow up. He would love to watch mom make popcorn. So she would make popcorn on one of those air poppers that shoots it through. And he would sit down there, look up at her, and hopefully some would fall on the floor. And eventually they did. But as he progressively got older, you could see his head get closer and closer to the counter. Eventually he was just right there. But we never, ever really had a problem with him stealing food. And the reason why we never really had that issue is because of the fact that he had what I was talking about earlier. He had something called, it was a motility issue, is kind of what they figured. But it's megaesophagus is the best, it's the best way to look it up and understand what's happening. Basically, he would eat, the food wouldn't exactly push down. So as you know, when you swallow, you can kind of feel your sphincter muscle push the food down your esophagus, and then it goes into your stomach. Well, what would happen is it would get stuck in his throat, and it would go into his lungs, and he eventually had aspiration pneumonia at one point. As he was growing up, that first half year, we're like, gosh, what is, he always hacks. Like, does he have kennel cough? No, the doctor said he didn't have kennel cough. Just couldn't figure it out. Well, what was happening is the kibble was stuck in his throat, and he's just trying to get it out, but he can't because, he's struggling. It's in one area or in his lungs. So at one point, I remember this was the fall of 2019. I got a call when I was in a meeting at work, at school, and she said something's wrong with him. He is not moving. He's puking green. He won't get up. That's not like him. I rushed home, scooped him up in my arms. I think at that point he was probably like 70 pounds maybe. Ran down our stairs, ran over to Rochester to Blue Pearl, which was the emergency vet at the time. I don't believe it's any longer there. And this was this was the fall of 2020, COVID times. And the reason I know this is because they couldn't really go inside, I believe. Anywho, take him there, and they go, yeah, he's got aspiration pneumonia. I go, well, what's that? And they go, well, he develops from the lungs and that. I'm like, well, is he going to be okay? And the doctor says, I'm not really sure. I'm like, oh, okay. So that threw me off there for a loop. And he goes, but we got to keep him overnight. We have to cool him down because he had 107 temperature. Now, for a dog, 104 is a high temperature. For humans, that's extremely high. But for a dog, 104 is a high temperature. But for 107, that was extremely high, they said. So they had to put towels on him that were cool, that were wet, and they eventually got his temperature down. So that was the first thing. And then they had to figure out, I don't know, I can't remember everything they had to do. I'm sure my wife can recall better than I can. But they called me up the next morning. I remember I went to the gym because we had to come home and sleep. You can't stay at the hospital. It was COVID times. And I remember he called me up and he goes, well, he's doing much better. He's doing good. He should be good to go, by the time we close. And I'm like, oh, awesome. Okay, so what do we got to do? And they said, well, what you want to do is you want to get his food nice and soggy and then feed it to him. Okay, sounds good. That's easy enough. We'll just put the food in the water bowl until his next meal, and then it'll be all nice and soggy for him. I think what they actually meant, because we went through this process one more time at least, if not two, I think what they meant is get it into a milkshake consistency, because that's what we eventually ended up doing. Was every single meal we gave him, which was twice a day, we would mix up 3 cups. We would put it in a bowl, get it wet so it'd be nice and soggy. Then before his meal, put it in the, we got ourselves, I think it was a Black & Decker. It was like a juicer type thing, pretty simple. Anyways, we'd put it in there, add some more water to it, and then that way it would break it down into almost a liquid / milkshake consistency, and we did that for every single meal for about 4 years, I think, is by the time we figured out this is what he has to do. So for 4 years, my wife and I, religiously, we did that. So, as you can imagine, when we go on vacation, we would have to have someone come to the house, and they would have to do that. So Justin and his wife, Lana, they helped out one year when we went on a cruise. They fed him and did all the things that they needed to do in order for him not to have any kibble stuck in his throat, to not aspirate. And then we would have my aunt came over a couple times to take care of him, and they all knew the process. We would even try to have a couple meals ready so it was less work for them. But every time we went on vacation on like a cruise, I got nervous every time, because I know that if we were doing it, nothing's going to happen. But if one thing changes or it doesn't get broken down that much into the milkshake consistency, it could all be gone, and that person, whoever's taking care of him, she would have to rush him to the emergency vet. And so we had numbers of many people who could pick him up and put him into the car and take him if necessary. But luckily, in those years, nothing ever happened. Everyone did a fantastic job. So For 4 years-ish or more, we consistently mixed up his food in a Black & Decker juicer. I think we went through 3 of them, if I remember right. I think 3 of them. Eventually, the motor's burned out because 3 cups of dog kibble, even if it's, mushy, still is hard on those motors. So anyways, we eventually got over that hump, and he was good. We had no problems anymore after the milkshake. We never had to take him to emergency vet. He never aspirated once again. And then the one problem we always said we had was he wasn't very good with other dogs. Not every dog, just not ones that were like his size or near his size. It was always like he had it's like he needed to dominate or be the dominant one of the 2. Now, his brother, Cooper, if you remember, you can go back and listen to that one. That was well over a year ago when I did that episode. He was about, I want to say 50 to 60 pounds, somewhere in there. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure he was about 55 or 60. Anyway, so he was a bagel, as we called him, a Basset Beagle. So he's a bagel. And those 2 got along. He would irritate the hell out of Cooper all the time. And they had this... Stephanie would go and get a toy and it'd make the crunchy noises in there. And one of them was, now that I don't remember, I think it's a pink dragon or it was a green dragon or lizard. Anyways, those 2 would fight over that one thing. Of all the toys we had, they would fight over that one, tug of war, steal it from each other. It was just hilarious. It was like Jake, even though he eventually became bigger than Cooper. He was the little asshole of a brother to Cooper. But you know what? We also think, and this is kind of the reason why we got Jake, was because we wanted Cooper to live longer. And I kind of have to agree with my wife that it probably did allow him to make it another year or 2 more than where he was, because it just kept him youthful. He would still pick on him all the way until... I would say like about the last half of Cooper's life, Jake would still pick on him left and right, get him riled up. They'd nip at each other, or Cooper would nip at him, but they just wanted to play, really is all it was. And then as Cooper did wind down, we had to start putting diapers on him, if you remember. Eventually, he realized that he wasn't doing good, and he didn't do that much anymore, but he would go lay by him and stuff like that, and they were just the best of buds. But he did get along with smaller dogs. As I said, my mother-in-law's dog is, they call it a teddy bear. And he's maybe 10 pounds, 15 pounds, maybe a foot off the ground at best, half a foot. But those 2 got along really well. But Oliver, that's his name, Oliver would nip and, kind of talk back to Jake. And Jake would back off. But if you got another dog around him, he was wanting to aggressively either dominate or wanting to battle them. And so that was one thing we said we wish we had done a better job socializing. But as he was growing up, we went through COVID, and you weren't really allowed to go a whole lot of places anywhere. Even if we went to a dog park, I don't think there had been any dogs there for him to socialize with. So that's one mistake we feel like we made with Jake, is that he just wasn't socialized well, and that's on us. It's all good. But he loved people, except for guys. If you were not a guy that grew up with him, so like my dad or Justin, he was not a huge fan of them. He was timid, and we're not really sure why. We're not sure if it's because we moved when he was 2.5, 3 years, and maybe he saw the guys taking out all the furniture, and maybe that gave him something, or he never had a bad experience with a guy that I'm aware of, but there was something. But he eventually warmed up to a few of my friends very slowly. One of them that he really eventually started to like was Tyler Weber, and he was on the podcast, if you remember. He was the one that had managed a marijuana farm. He really liked Tyler, so he wasn't afraid when Tyler would walk in the door. He'd go over and hang out with him. I don't know if it's because they smelled his bulldog. He has a bulldog, so I don't know if it's because he smelled that on him. And then eventually he warmed up to Josh Harrison, who was also on the podcast. He warmed up to him eventually, but Josh had to sit down. So Josh is a pretty tall guy. He's like 6'2", big beard. So I think it was after he sat down, though, then he would come over and kind of sniff him out, check him out. But yeah, he wasn't too fond of guys if you weren't actually in his life from day one. And actually, it's kind of funny because I was like, well, Justin moved away, and then he came back for my wedding. I'm like, will he remember him? Is he going to remember all of Justin, that he's okay to be around? And sure enough, Justin came back for my wedding back in 2023, and Jake had no problem with him. He was a little timid of some of the other guys there, but not Justin, because Justin had grown up with him. And Justin actually, like I said, him and his wife, they did a doggy daycare for us one time when we went on a cruise. So we did, we had little issues with some socialization with dogs and maybe guys, but other than that, he was a really good dog. He slumbered on the couch. He would he was so well trained, I thought. And I had a beagle, so he wasn't that great trained. Cooper was pretty good, but they're still Bassets. They're still a Basset and Hound, so they still follow their nose a little bit. Jake didn't get too thrilled with food. He kind of knew that he couldn't have any food unless someone gave it to him, and we always told everyone, don't do it, because he has mega esophagus / motility issues, and everyone respected that. So he never really got too excited because he got shot down right away, and then he would just go lay underneath the table and sit by your feet is all he would do. He didn't really care. And then Cooper would beg. Cooper would beg. My dad was his favorite to get snacks from. But Jake had a couple things he could have. He could have milk bones, so he loved milk bones. He could have the pill pockets. That's how we give him pills every so often. And then he would have his very expensive dog food. So I got him the Science Diet, the Hills Science Diet, and I got him what was called, I believe it was called the digestive one. And at first it was $60 per bag. I'm like, geez, it's going to be expensive. And he goes through about every 3 weeks or so. Well, eventually it went up to $83 every 3 weeks. So he became expensive, but that was the least of the worries, because, I think that time when I took him for his aspiration pneumonia, I believe that was like a $5,000 bill. Then the other time he had aspiration, I believe it was a $1,200 bill. And then the last one, that weekend situation before he passed away, believe I spent somewhere between $6,000 and $10,000, I believe, for 2 days. I believe it was like $5,000 a day, and it was like a day and a half. So anyways, we would have done anything for him, though. I would have, whatever it would have taken, basically, other than a 5% chance, $20,000 surgery that he might not live through. That was where I had to draw the line, because we wanted him to be with his family. So yeah, he was a really, really amazing dog. So if you can obviously tell in the photo, he was of the tan. He was the tan one. And I also pulled up some stuff just on American Kennel Club. Oh, never mind. I guess this is dead. But American Kennel Club, these dogs can get anywhere, up to like 250 pounds. But we had a 155-pound dog. There's the brindle. That's one of them. That's like a black and tan almost. Then there's the fawn, and that's more of, or like an apricot. And then there's, I believe he's considered the fawn, the tan. And then there was also a black one too. But there's also many other variations of Mastiffs, which is kind of the cool thing as well. There's a Neapolitan Mastiff. There's a Bull Mastiff. Then there's just the English Mastiff. But most people know this dog probably from Sandlot. That's the dog that was the Beast. And he dressed up as Sandlot one year. Him and I went as, what was the guy's name? Well, we know the dog's name. What was I, Henry? No, not Henry. What the heck was his name? I don't know. Rodriguez. And he went as the Beast. So we were that for Halloween one year, which pretty much everyone does that. But we had, a lot of good support groups out there when we did Facebook. There was Mastiff Healths. There was a Mega Esophagus page. There was just English Mastiffs in general. But yeah, he was a really, really fun dog to have. Really smart dog. Listened very well. He's a very well-mannered dog. He didn't get too... He kind of knew his boundaries, but if you let him run and chase after something, he would be full speed. He was very athletic, as I was saying before. I couldn't believe how athletic a big dog was. He would fly up the stairs. And most of the time, if you see an English Mastiff, they're very big, and they don't exactly fly up much. So he liked his walks, but they always said, don't walk your English Mastiff any further than you want to carry them home. So that was never an issue, though. But we always took that into consideration. So his walks were like an eighth of a mile one way and then back. So you're sitting there, you're talking about maybe a fourth of a mile walk. So they're very low maintenance when it comes to that. And that was one thing I told Stephanie. I said, when we get this second dog, it's got to be one that is lazy, because I don't want to come home and run a dog around after working. I don't want to come home and train a German Shepherd that's going to be high energy, or a Husky or whatever it might be. Didn't want to do that. I want to come home, relax with the dog, and then just have fun with them on a very low-key situation. Because Cooper was low-key. Cooper was pretty simple maintenance-wise. Go anywhere, you jump up in the car, and that's kind of what I wanted. But I said it would be really cool if we had a giant breed. I know they don't live as long, but I said, 10-ish years is, I could be okay with that. So that was how we kind of agreed, and then we wanted something that didn't shed too terribly much. So I'm not going to say he didn't shed at all, but he was what they consider a medium shedder. So he was a fantastic dog in the sense of his character, where if you wanted to just lay with him, he was game for that. If you want to go on a walk, he was game for that. If you want him to sit down and have treats, he was good for that too. You want to go to grandma's house, he was good for that too. So you pretty much go anywhere that you want. So the one also character is we wanted them to be good with a child, because we just knew that there was a child coming at some point in his life. Well, at least we hoped there was. And this is kind of the sad part, where he could tell, and I think he kind of knew that Stephanie was pregnant before she did. At least she says that. She believes that he knew, because he would be more cuddly with her than had been previously. And so then obviously we found out, and we're so excited, like, gosh, this is going to be awesome. We got the perfect dog for this. He's just going to be this big teddy bear, because we watched things online of other English Mastiffs and just giant breed dogs in general, seeing their newborn human. And we were so excited for that. And it's unfortunate it got cut short, because as we started progressing in the pregnancy, obviously we're starting to get Laney's room ready for things of that nature. And eventually we had the crib set up. We had some decorations in there, the chair. And eventually, or every so often, we would see him. He would go up to her room and just lay next to the crib. So it was kind of a sad situation when we believe he knows what was happening. He understood what was going on, and he was just waiting for his baby human to come around. And he didn't make it that long, unfortunately. So I think he was still part. I think he was still part knowing that she was on the way, or something was on the way, because he was there for the gender reveal too. Oh yeah. In fact, if you haven't seen, he actually picked out her name. He picked out Laney's name. We saw a video online and we thought, gosh, that'd be a cool way if we only have two names that we can't decide between. Let's do this tennis ball thing. Some people would do it on 3, but I said, let's just do it on 2. But this was even before we found out he was sick. Well, then eventually we found out that he was sick, and we were like, well, we have these 2 names. We're not really sure which one we like, and we would love for him to be a part of this whole situation, because of the fact that he was waiting for her. And at least he has some sort of he had some sort of impact in her life. She'll never remember that, but we'll show her videos of that. But we had 2 names. One was Laney, obviously. That's the one he picked. And then Nora. So what I did is we wrote them on tennis balls. I threw them out in the yard. I think it was exactly on this day, too, because of the fact, and the reason I say that is because that was his last day that he really would even jog. So we did it on that Monday. I said, we better do it now before he doesn't want to do this at all. And obviously he's not a retriever dog, so I threw the balls out there. He ran to one of them, and then I had to he just picked it up, and then he just sat there and stared at me. So I had to con him in to get back over here so we can show the camera what the name is. And then eventually he came back with the ball in his name. But he picked out Laney, and so that's what we went with. The other one, as I said, was Nora. Nora was our other option. And so we let Jake have a part in that in her life. So he was, if you can't tell, he was a really big, not just size-wise, but he's a really big part of our family for Stephanie and I. He was supposed to be part of the family currently, but obviously it didn't happen. One other thing that we just did recently in the last 2 weeks is we moved to a new house. So that was a little hard as we were starting to move things and starting to sell off things that wouldn't fit in the new house. We kind of remember some of those memories that were happening or that happened in certain areas. I'm not one that usually cares about material things that with like sentimental values, like sell a house. And maybe it's because I sell real estate. It's just a house is a house. You just keep, investing and moving on. A car, same thing, unless there's some big significant thing in there. But it was kind of hard watching some of those items leave the house as we were selling things off, because we go, oh, that's where, like, I sold the couch to my cousin Joey, and we were sitting there thinking, like, right in that corner of that couch is where he used to lay all the time with us. So it was hard to kind of watch that. And then as the house started emptying a little bit more and more and more, but we had to get past that and make our new memories at our new house. And then just recently I came back from Sturgis as well. And that was the reason I'm wearing this Deadwood shirt today, is not only because it's brand new from Deadwood, but we took a vacation to Sturgis and Custer State Park and Rapid City back in 2021 when COVID was a big problem. You couldn't really go anywhere, but South Dakota said, you can come in anything you want. You don't need to mask up. You can come in the stores, and you can even bring your dogs into the stores. So we took a trip with the dogs in a truck, literally over the spring break. That would be a normal spring break. We just said, let's pack up the dogs and let's just go west. I had a week off from teaching, and my wife just took some time off of her work like she normally would have for a cruise that we go on at that time. And we just packed up the dogs and we headed west, and we didn't really know where we were going to end up. We just said, well, we'll stop at Rapid City, and then maybe we'll go to Colorado, and then maybe we'll go over here, we'll go there, Wyoming. We only stayed in Rapid City, and that's because we had to pack accordingly, not for Cooper, but for Jake. We had to make sure we had each meal separated out for how long we're going to be. I think we went for 5 days total. So we had to pack each meal accordingly. And then we had to bring the blender along so we could make it into a milkshake consistency. We needed a hotel that would allow dogs, and that we had that. And eventually they got settled into the room, and we said, let's just discover what's all to discover around this area. And so we just sat out there, and then we went to Sturgis. We went to some of the state parks, and man, they were such good riders. We leave them in the vehicle because it was cool out. It was like 50 degrees, so you just cracked the window, and they were fine. They sleep on the car seats and stuff of that nature, and then we would just go do like Mount Rushmore. I mean, it only takes a half hour to do. And then we would take them out for walks and stuff like that. Then on our way home, on one of our last stops, it was Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and we took them to the falls, and we have really nice pictures there. So on our way home from Sturgis, we stopped in Sioux Falls to stay the night, and I really wanted to go see the falls one more time just because I remembered the fun vacation that we had, which was like really their only vacation they ever had with us per se. So I wanted to go and just take it all in, remember, Jake and Cooper, and especially Jake, just because of the fact that he didn't get to live as long as Cooper got his 16 years almost. So and then in Deadwood, we were able to go into the shops with them. They said, bring your dogs into the shops. And I'm like, really? You can bring them in? That's cool. And so it was just kind of going back out there, brought up a lot of memories with my buddies, just thinking about the dogs and thinking about Jake, because this one took me about 3 months to decide I was going to record this one. It's a little tougher. I don't know if I could have done it almost immediately afterwards. It was just so much of a shock to both of us. But that's kind of his life. He had a tough life, but a really spoiled life at the same time. We would have done anything for him. In fact, I did anything for him as possible, and so did Stephanie. We always included him and them in everything we did, whether it was Christmas, Thanksgiving, or as many things as we could possibly take him to. We would always take him to those things as well. So I just wanted to do this one because I think, if you're looking for a dog, English Mastiff is one that you might want to look into just because of their temperament, especially with kids. They're really good with kids. They're lovable. They're big giants. They care. They are a guard dog. That was originally what they were bred for, but they're not exactly the most aggressive dog. So if you're looking for an intimidation factor, they got that, because when he would bark and they didn't know who was coming in, it was intimidating. But then he would back off because he wasn't a fighter. So he was an intimidation factor, but he was also just a big, gentle giant that wanted to lick your face or even your ears or whatever it was. And he was he was an awesome dog. He was really, really big part of us. We're not really sure what we're going to do next for a dog, or we kind of have a timeline of when, but we're not really sure what. I still like the English Mastiff because I feel like our time got cut short with him, but I also not sure because I don't feel like I want to replace him or have that feeling. So we thought maybe a dog in the future, possibly in the spring or summer of next year when we're able to train them properly, rather than if it's in the winter, not wanting to go out in the freezing cold here in Minnesota. So that's all I have for Jake. If you're wondering what he looks like, again, you can tune into the YouTube portion. Pictures in the background. He was a beautiful, beautiful dog. He had really good markings. He took very good photos as well. So that's all I have for this week. Next week we'll have maybe a little bit more upbeat of an episode, but this one just kind of feels like a little bit of closure for Jake, for maybe myself, obviously, and for my wife Stephanie. Hopefully this sheds some light on certain things. Dogs can overcome a lot. Mega esophagus, you can do whatever it takes to make a dog's life really, really good and peaceful if you're willing to commit to it, obviously. Not every dog has these situations. It's a very low situation of the mega esophagus portion. It's kind of rare. But the liver cancer, it seems like cancer gets just about every single dog eventually. It's just a matter of when. So that's all I have. If you're looking at an English Mastiff, go check out the AKC website. Just look into them. They're a really cool dog. And if you don't know what they look like, just remember, it's the beast from Sandlot. But again, this has been another episode of Brews and Crews. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment. Maybe comment your favorite breed of dog. That'd be cool. Or maybe even post your photo somewhere on the Brews and Crews page of what your dog looks like or what their name is and all that kind of stuff. Because for most people, we know that dogs hold a pretty special part in our hearts, and they are pets for us. And they're a very big part of a lot of people's lives, if not a majority of people's lives. So I want to give one big cheers to Jake. You were a great dog, and we loved you. Cheers.